Have you ever wondered how something as small as a pocket watch could hold so much power? What if I told you that in the 1800s, carrying a simple timepiece wasn't just about telling the time, it was about showing the world your wealth, status, and even your control over the very fabric of life? And what if I told you that this tiny accessory could dictate the course of business, politics, and even personal relationships? How did a small, intricate mechanism come to symbolize so much in a world where time meant everything? Could something as ordinary as a pocket watch reveal the secret to success in an era defined by its class divisions? Stick around until the end, because as we unfold the history of the pocket watch, you'll discover how it went from being a practical tool to an extraordinary symbol of power, one that could shape an empire, a person's legacy, and the very way time was valued. Picture this. It's the early 1800s. A man in a finely tailored suit steps into a grand ballroom. And as he reaches into his pocket, he pulls out an object that draws every eye in the room. A pocket watch, gleaming under the soft candlelight, tells more than just the time. It speaks of wealth, influence, and a deep connection to the very concept of power. But how did a simple timepiece become so much more than just a tool for telling the hour? The pocket watch was not merely a functional accessory, it was a declaration. At a time when the boundaries between the upper class and working class were sharply defined, the pocket watch was a symbol of separation. Only the wealthy and powerful could afford such an intricate piece of craftsmanship. A finely made pocket watch was an investment in status, a reminder that the bearer of such a piece had control over time itself, something most people of the era could only dream of. It's almost poetic when you think about it. In an age where every moment counted, this small object carried the weight of ambition. It didn't just tell the time, it dictated it. The more elaborate the design, the more intricate the mechanism, the higher the social standing it represented. And for those who didn't possess such luxury, well, they could only imagine the power it conferred. As I sit here reflecting on the power of that small object, I can't help but be struck by how something so seemingly simple could have such profound significance. It wasn't just about being on time, it was about being in control of your world, your work, your schedule, your life. Time, after all, was a resource that could be shaped, manipulated, and ultimately bought. But what made the pocket watch even more fascinating was that it was not only for the elite. In time, the rise of the middle class saw an influx of these timepieces into more hands, each one a symbol of progress, ambition, and a desire to rise up. So, how did this object evolve from being a necessity to becoming a universal symbol of power? And how did it shape the very fabric of society? Let's dive deeper into this story. Because the journey of the pocket watch is not just about luxury, it's about understanding the delicate balance of time, class, and human aspiration. Let's explore the fascinating world of the pocket watch. And you might just find that its legacy isn't as distant as you think. The story of the pocket watch begins in the mid-17th century, when timekeeping was a luxury not just in terms of access, but in sheer design. In an era where the sun, not a clock, governed the day, the idea of carrying around an instrument to track time was not a necessity, it was a novelty. Imagine, if you will, a craftsman in Europe, meticulously carving the first prototype of what would become one of the most coveted objects in history. At first, the pocket watch was purely practical, designed for those who could afford such a fine piece of craftsmanship. Like kings or merchant princes. It wasn't about flaunting wealth, it was about keeping track of appointments, meetings, and business, the very essentials of a life governed by punctuality. As centuries passed, however, the pocket watch began to evolve, not just in its design but in its meaning. By the late 18th century, pocket watches were no longer just functional. They had transformed into symbols of status, each one telling the story of its wearer's wealth, sophistication, and power. These timepieces, often intricate and beautifully crafted, became prized possessions, handed down from generation to generation, not merely for their utility but for their significance. When one of these watches was pulled from a waistcoat pocket in a crowd, it didn't just signal that the owner was punctual, it signaled that they were someone to be reckoned with. What fascinated me the most about the evolution of the pocket watch is how it was intertwined with the very social fabric of the time. Think about it. The wealthy could afford gold, silver, and platinum cases adorned with gemstones, while the working class had to make do with simpler, more affordable versions. And as the Industrial Revolution swept through Europe and the United States in the 1800s, the ability to measure time became even more critical. It wasn't just about personal appointments anymore, it was about a society that was running on schedules, work hours, and, perhaps most importantly, control. Time was no longer just something you measured, it was something you owned. And owning a fine pocket watch meant you had mastered it. For the wealthy, the pocket watch was an extension of their persona, a reflection of their place in society. These watches were often the most expensive items in their wardrobes. A fine pocket watch, passed down through generations, spoke volumes about the family's legacy and their continued dominance. A man with such a watch wasn't just wealthy, he was powerful. Someone who had the world at his fingertips. Someone who could afford the luxury of time. But this wasn't just about the elite. The 1800s saw the rise of the middle class, who, inspired by the idea of upward mobility, began to acquire pocket watches, albeit less extravagant. For them, the pocket watch wasn't just a luxury, it was a symbol of aspiration. A visible sign that they were on the rise. It was a way to participate in the exclusive world of the wealthy. To show that they too could master their time, control their destiny, and move closer to the elite status that had always seemed just out of reach. As I reflect on this, it strikes me how much of our world today is shaped by this desire for control, for status, and for the perception of mastery over time. We've moved on to digital devices that, much like the pocket watch, help us manage our lives. But the sentiment remains. The pocket watch was never just about telling time. It was about defining who you were in the world. And in many ways, it still is. So, how did something as simple as a pocket watch come to represent so much? And why does its legacy still resonate today? Let's take a closer look at how this tiny timepiece moved beyond mere practicality and became a symbol of prestige and power. When you think about the power dynamics of the 1800s, one object comes to mind almost immediately: the pocket watch. It was not simply a tool for telling time, it was a subtle yet undeniable symbol of control. In a world that was rapidly industrializing, where class divisions were becoming more entrenched, the pocket watch was like a silent decree. It said that the person holding it had mastered time itself. The wealthy and powerful didn't just own a pocket watch, they wielded it like a badge of authority. It's almost as if the pocket watch held the pulse of society. Think about it. In the world of business, politics, and even warfare, punctuality wasn't just a matter of personal discipline, it was a matter of power. If you were a businessman or a politician, arriving late was more than just an inconvenience, it was a statement that you didn't value the time of others. And in a world where every minute counted, that could cost you dearly. The pocket watch became more than just an accessory, it became a tool for reinforcing authority. It was the mark of someone who was always in control, someone who had the time and the means to do what they wanted when they wanted. I often think about how differently time is perceived today. We check our smartphones every few minutes, constantly aware of the ticking clock. But back then, a pocket watch wasn't just about telling time, it was about telling others when to listen, when to act, and when to submit. A businessman would glance at his watch during a negotiation, and suddenly, the power dynamic shifted. It wasn't about what was being said, but about when it was being said. And that timing? It was everything. The military was another arena where the pocket watch played a crucial role. A general, with his pocket watch, commanded not just the battlefield but the very rhythm of his army. A synchronized battalion, where each soldier's movements were timed to perfection, was a sight to behold. And when the general checked his watch, it was a reminder to everyone around him that time was an essential part of their success or failure. But what fascinated me most was how the pocket watch seeped into the personal lives of the wealthy, becoming an unspoken marker of their social status. In the salons and drawing rooms of the elite, a well-made pocket watch was a topic of admiration. It was about more than just the timepiece, it was about the subtle conversations it sparked. Look at the craftsmanship on that watch, someone might say, but really, what they were admiring was the power it represented, the privilege of owning time. As the 1800s progressed, even the emerging middle class began to adopt the pocket watch as a symbol of upward mobility. It was no longer just about the old aristocracy. For those in the middle class, owning a pocket watch wasn't just practical, it was aspirational. It was a visible sign that they had entered a world where time was valuable. A world where they too could be part of the elite, even if only in small ways. What strikes me today is how the symbolism of the pocket watch has endured. In a way, we still carry the echoes of that power. Modern watches, smartphones, and even the simple act of checking the time still carry with them a sense of control. A reminder that time is something we manage, not something that manages us. But back then, it was a much more overt display of authority, something that could be seen, felt, and understood by everyone in the room. So, how did a simple pocket watch evolve into a tool of authority and control? And why does it still resonate with us today? Let's take a closer look at how this small object played such a huge role in shaping the very foundations of society. It's fascinating how an object as seemingly simple as a pocket watch could have such a profound impact on culture, far beyond the elite circles it originally belonged to. When we think of the 1800s, the image that often comes to mind is that of the rich and powerful, each one clutching a finely crafted timepiece. But as society shifted, so did the cultural significance of the pocket watch. It didn't just remain in the hands of the aristocracy, it became woven into the fabric of everyday life, influencing not just the rich, but the artists, the writers, and even the common folk who longed to grasp a piece of that same power. One of the most intriguing aspects of the pocket watch's rise to cultural prominence was how it entered the world of literature and art. Writers, particularly those in the Romantic era, began to use the pocket watch as a symbol in their works. Think of Charles Dickens, whose characters would often check their pocket watches, not just to mark the passing of time but to underline the tension between control and chaos in an industrialized world. The ticking of the pocket watch in these works wasn't merely a mechanical sound. It was a reminder of how time could be manipulated, how it could govern the lives of people, and how it often escaped their grasp. But it wasn't just in literature. The pocket watch became a symbol in art as well, often appearing in portraits of the wealthy. Artists would paint their subjects holding their timepieces as a statement, something subtle, yet powerful. It wasn't just about showing that the subject was punctual. It was about demonstrating that they were part of a world where time was their most valuable asset. It was a way to show, even through art, that they controlled more than just their moments, they controlled their place in society. As I reflect on how the pocket watch seeped into popular culture, I can't help but marvel at how it made its way into everyday life. Even among those who could never afford such luxury, the middle class, with their dreams of upward mobility, saw the pocket watch as more than just a tool. It was a key to a world they aspired to. Imagine the excitement of someone from a modest background when they finally acquired a pocket watch. It wasn't just a timekeeper. It was a symbol that they too could someday sit at the same table as the powerful. That they too could be part of that carefully measured world of high society. And as time went on, the pocket watch continued to find its way into popular culture. Think of the iconic films and stories of the early 20th century, how the pocket watch still played a role in defining characters. In detective novels, the villain often had a pocket watch, symbolizing his control over time and his ability to manipulate it. Meanwhile, the hero, with his own timepiece, fought against the tide of fate, trying to reclaim control. Even today, the pocket watch's influence lingers in our culture. Despite its decline as a practical item, we see it in films, in fashion, and in the symbolism of timepieces that go beyond just telling the time. The pocket watch may have started as a tool for the elite, but its cultural impact extended far beyond that, infiltrating literature, art, and the collective imagination of society. So, how did this symbol of wealth and power become so deeply ingrained in the cultural consciousness? And how does its influence still shape the way we view time, control, and status today? Let's dive deeper into how the pocket watch, with all its prestige, became a cultural icon that reached far beyond the exclusive circles of the elite. As we come to the end of this journey through the fascinating history of the pocket watch, I can't help but reflect on how much more this small object represents than just its mechanical workings. At first glance, it might seem like a relic of a bygone era, something we've long since replaced with wristwatches, smartphones, or digital devices. But when we look deeper, we see that the legacy of the pocket watch is still alive and well today. woven into the very fabric of our modern lives. The pocket watch was never just about telling the time, it was about the power to control it. For centuries, it signified more than wealth or status, it represented mastery over life itself. It was a tool that told not just the time, but also who you were, where you stood in society, and how much control you had over your destiny. Those who wore it were seen as figures of authority, symbols of influence in a world that was ever evolving and rapidly industrializing. But the pocket watch also carried something much more personal. It told the story of ambition and aspiration. For the middle class, it was a symbol of upward mobility, a reminder that they too could have a place in that world of controlled time and untold power. It spoke of dreams, of hard work, and the hope that, one day, they might wear their success as visibly as the elite who had once owned such timepieces. As I sit here today, looking at the modern watches and gadgets we carry, I realize that the legacy of the pocket watch hasn't truly faded. The essence of what it represented, the control of time, the display of status, the connection to something greater than ourselves, still exists in the way we measure our days. We may no longer pull a pocket watch from our waistcoat pockets, but we still wear timepieces, check our phones, and plan our lives around time. And in many ways, we are still seeking that same mastery, that same power over the moments that shape our lives. The pocket watch may have been replaced, but its spirit lives on. It reminds us of a time when every second mattered, when how we spend our moments could define us. And as we continue to move through our own lives, I think it's important to remember that time is not just something to be kept track of. It's something we must respect, something we must control, and ultimately, something we must cherish. So, the next time you glance at your watch, or even your phone, remember that you're not just checking the time, you're connecting with a piece of history. The pocket watch may no longer be with us in its original form, but its legacy continues to tick along, a quiet reminder of the power, the prestige, and the preciousness of time itself.